Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and we're back with a new game review in the year of 2024. And the one I decided to pick for today happens to be a PS2 game, and that is Sakura Wars 5 Episode 0. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What about the first four? You never reviewed any of those. And yes, you are right, I haven't. But I do know quite a bit about the series for that they are strategy RPGs that happen to have some dating sim elements to them. And one of my good friends used to own a copy of So Long My Love on the Wii, which this game I'm looking at is connected to. And I also watched the original OVA series from the 90s that was based after the first game. So while I haven't played any of the mainline games yet, I am familiar with them enough. Although I'm sure some elitist fans might not be happy with that answer, but well, like I said, I do what I want. And there's a joy in taking a look at the weird shit, and this game definitely qualifies as weird shit. So the game was published by Sega, obviously, and was developed by Red Entertainment and Overworks. And instead of being a strategy RPG, this one happens to be a 3D beat-em-up hack and slash. And it came out in the year 2004. And as the title suggests, yes, this is Episode 0, meaning that it is a prequel to Sakura Wars So Long My Love, and it stars one of the characters from that game being Gemini Sunrise, who happens to be an American cowgirl who loves Japanese culture. And I'm not gonna lie, I kinda miss it when games used to put out a random game within a long-running series that just starred one of their random characters within it. Sort of like a character spin-off game. I feel like we rarely get those nowadays. So anyways, let's get talking about the game's story. So it takes place in America in the 1920s, where the main character Gemini is trying to get to New York City, and she's traveling around with her horse Rally. Or if you played the English version of So Long My Love, they changed the horse's name to Larry, and I always thought that was funny. So anyways, on their way trying to get to New York, they end up meeting this girl named Janita Cushing, who is being targeted by a group of bad guys, and the leader of this group of bad guys happens to be Patrick Hamilton, who clearly does not look like a bad guy whatsoever. So the reason why this group is targeting this little girl is because she apparently has magical powers and they want her. But of course, Gemini Sunrise ends up traveling along with her while trying to get away from these creeps. And as they are adventuring, they happen to meet two other characters along the way, being Brad and Chamber. And Chamber is definitely the most American-looking guy in this whole game, if you can't already tell. Because everyone knows that every American guy has to wear some sort of amalgamation of the American flag as part of their outfit. But all joking aside, yeah, that's basically it for the story as far as I can tell. And yes, because this game is Japan only with no fan translation, I had to use the good old-fashioned Google Translate on your phone with the camera option. And it actually worked quite well. But also one other thing I should mention with this game when it comes to the story aspects is that it does use the same system that the mainline series use when it comes to the dialogue options, where you have 3 different choices to pick from, and you gotta do it fast because you got a time limit. So yeah, this game also has it too, but you're not using it to date people though. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the story of what you need to know about Sakura Wars 5 Episode 0. So now, let's get moving on and start talking about the gameplay. So this game is mission-based, where you got the red M's, which are the main missions, and then the blue S's, which are the sub-missions. And you can actually redo all these missions as many times as you want to get as much EXP to level up your character. So most missions in this game consist of killing every enemy in the room, or trying to get from point A to point B. And just like in most hack and slash games at the time, some runes will cut you off and you'll have to kill all the enemies within there, and then the gates will go away and then you can continue on more. And there are some missions within this game that definitely do feel like a Musho game, aka a Dynasty Warrior game, and I can definitely see where they're coming from, especially this one mission in the game where it's just a pure chaos of a battlefield. And there are some parts of a mission that are optional, but if you do them, you do get extra EXP out of it, where you gotta kill a certain type of enemy within a time limit, and if you do it fast enough, then you get extra points. You can also get a bunch of EXP by doing a bunch of combos where you don't let the attack meter go down. Kinda similar to Devil May Cry with the way how it ranks you with how you keep building up the enemies. But probably the most hilarious thing that makes me laugh about this game is that some of the items that you pick up throughout the missions are quite funny. For an example, you got defense up and attack up, which are a sword and a hat, which, you know, seems pretty typical, right? And the horseshoe is for speed, which also makes sense. But as for the health items, it's french fries and hamburgers. Now that right there is just amazingly hilarious. And before anyone gets offended about it, I mean, come on guys, it's clearly a joke, and besides, if they made a game about, like, a Canadian lumberjack girl riding on a moose while you're cutting up a bunch of enemies with an axe, and you collect maple syrup and pancakes for health items, you think I'd get mad over that? Of course I wouldn't, that'd be amazing, I'd love that shit. Yeah, the point is that this game's humor is definitely very dumb, and I'm all for it. Now as for the customized section, there is 3 different skills that you can level up. There's strength, speed, and horsepower. And you can change out to different swords, and almost every sword in the game has different special attacks that you can use. And then there's the equipment that you can equip to your horse, and this is the one part that I feel like a lot of people don't experiment much with. Because these equipment pieces, they don't gain up any stats or anything like that. What they do is that they allow your horse to do different movesets within the battles. And I'll talk more about that in a sec. So let's get moving on and start talking about the game's controls. And the controls in this game are very all over the place, but I'll cover one thing at a time. So first, let's talk about the button layout. You move around with the left stick, the right stick controls the camera, although you can also control the camera a little bit with R1 and L1 if you wanted to. And then X is the jump, square is for the sword attack, circle is for the horse toss, which allows the horse to toss an enemy up in the air, and triangle is for the special attack. L2 is to do a dash, and then R2 is to do a special horse attack. Basically, the horse will just punch the air for a little bit, but if you press R2 while you're running or in the dash mode, then you actually do a slide attack. Now here's the part where I got to explain a little bit about the equipment system in this game, is that depending on what equipment you have, then it also depends on what moves you're able to do with the horse. For an example, one move that you can unlock is that you can hold down R2 and then press X and your character will do a flash kick. And yes, it looks completely batshit, and I love it. And another weird thing that I have to explain about the attacking is that yes, there is only one sword attack in the game, which is just the square button. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that you can do a couple different attacks with the square button. If you just press it normally, it's just a 3-hit combo. But if you keep pressing square while you have the left stick facing like left or right, you can actually do a sideways stab, which is just a 1-hit, but is a little bit stronger. But with a certain equipment piece that you can equip, if you spin the left stick in a circle while you're pressing square, then you can actually do a complete spin move, which is really helpful when you're being crowded. But you can't do that move at the very beginning of the game, and that's the thing that I think is really important when I talk about this game's controls, is that I know for a fact there are people out there that went into this game blindly without knowing much about it. They probably played the first 2 levels of the game and were just like, yeah, you just mash square to win and that's it. And well, they're not entirely wrong, because yes, you do press square a lot in this game. But there are other ways of attacking and building up your combos in this game. It's just the thing is, you just can't do them all right away. And it overall just feels very different than most Musho style games, where, you know, a lot of them is just a combination of pressing square and triangle back and forth. Now there are other moves you can get as well than just the ones I explained, but, you know, I'm not going to be here explaining all of them, but I just figured I might as well give you a little bit of an example. But yes, that's the basics of what you need to know about the button layout, but how do the controls feel? Well, this is the part that I think is very mixed for me. So, when it comes to the attacking and such, it feels pretty fine, nothing bad. I mean, it doesn't feel delayed, it doesn't feel slow or anything like that. But the big problem here is the movement in this game. Yeah, you'd think with a game where you're constantly riding on a horse it'd feel really fast, but nah, it actually feels kinda stiff. Like, turning around in this game feels a lot slower than I would have liked it to be. Also, the jumping in this game is very sluggish, and can be really tough to make your mark at certain parts. Now, thankfully, there's not much platforming you gotta do in this game, but the very few parts where there is a little bit of platforming, that's where you notice that the jumping in this game just doesn't feel right, especially when you're trying to attack enemies within the air. And lastly, I have to mention is that the camera work in this game is pretty messy. Every time you try to turn around and see an enemy that's behind you, it always feels like you're fighting with the camera a lot of the times. So yeah, those are my main complaints with this game's controls. The attacking actually feels pretty okay, and I have no problems with that whatsoever. Like, all the moves are pretty easy to pull off. It's just when it comes to moving around, the jumping, and the camera work, they all definitely could have used an upgrade. So now, let's get moving on and start talking about the game's graphics. And the graphics in this game is a little bit mixed, but I would say more average to decent. So probably the best part about this game's graphics is really just the character art. I've always really liked the art style within the Sakura Wars games, and this one always did look really good too. And I do like the way that the character models look as well. They all represent their character art nicely. And a lot of the enemy designs are pretty cool looking too. So yeah, I'd say that the character modeling in this game is pretty good for 2004 standards. But I think it's really just the backgrounds and the set pieces in this game are very much on the bland side. Now, I get that this is a Wild West game, and well, what's in the Wild West? You got rocks, cactuses, some trees, patches of grass, and more rocks, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So I get what they're going for here, but yeah, it's just not a very exciting looking game when it comes to a lot of the backgrounds. The only cool part of this game that I liked was the last couple of stages that look really different. But outside of that one, the rest of them are just kinda average and very forgettable looking. So I'd say overall that the graphics are more so average than anything. Like, there's nothing here that's just offensively bad looking, but nothing that really stands out too much, outside of the art direction, of course. But you gotta love the fact that there is one scene in this game where a horse eats meat. Yes, that's right. This horse is probably a cannibal. So now, as for the game's music, the music is fine for the most part. Like, there's also nothing wrong with it, but there's also nothing really much here that stands out to me. But a lot of it does fit the game very well. Like, a lot of it does sound like Western music, so there is that. But then there is a couple tracks that do sound very military fantasy themed, which also fits the whole Sakura Wars mainline game stuff, and I don't think it's as good as the mainline Sakura Wars game OSTs that I've heard, but as again, it's not bad. Weirdly enough, the main song that I do remember out of this game is actually the ending credits theme. It's actually quite interesting because it's very much like an American country sounding song where you have a acoustic guitar, some bass, and you even have a violin solo, and it's all sung in Japanese, and it's actually kinda catchy, I'm not gonna lie. It's probably one of the few country songs that I can actually say that I like, which is a rarity. So yeah, I thought that song was actually kinda cool and different, but yeah, outside of that though, when it comes to the main background music, yeah, it's just kind of there. But one cool thing that I should mention here is that if you do go to the sound test menu, it shows up all these different records of the different songs that you can play, but once you play one of them, it actually shows a car needle driving around the record, and I thought it just looked really cute. So if there's one cool thing I have to mention about the music that isn't the ending credits theme, was that the menu design for the sound test was quite creative. Now before we continue on, there is one other interesting thing I have to mention about this game, is that, believe it or not, there are other characters that you can play as within this game. Yeah, the whole time I was playing, I thought it would just be only controlling Gemini, but no, there are other characters you can play as, such as Ogami, Sakura from the OG games, and then you got Erika from the third game. And you can even use these same characters, but using the mech suit instead, which is very interesting. Because the mech suits in this game, from what I played of them, they actually controlled a bit better, for that the walking speed is actually not stiff at all, but unfortunately the jumping is still a problem. But there's still a slight improvement over the horses, and it's really weird that Erika's normal form in this one, she's dressed up like a cat, and she rides a zebra with a toy hammer. Yeah, it's quite bizarre. And how you get some of these characters is that you either had to beat the game of Gemini, and then there's some you gotta do some other like weird menial tasks, or you can enter in a password. And of course I had to look up the password online to get some of these things, but weirdly enough, there's even other extras where you have to get a password from using your phone. Yeah, remember when phones in the early 2000s looked like this? Yeah, it's kinda interesting, but yes, playing as these other characters though, you don't watch any of the cutscenes, you just go from mission to mission, and some of the missions are the same, but you might have some different enemies pop up, and you just level them up and equip different stuff. So now, if you wanted to go out and buy yourself a copy of this game, the lowest I've seen it for was $30, and the highest I've seen it for was actually over hundreds of dollars, which I don't even know why, because it seems like there's plenty of them that are about like 30 to 50. And even at $30, I still think it's a little bit much, but compared to so many other oddball games out there on the market right now, that's pretty damn cheap. Like, the fact that there's even a game out there that's still less than $50 is at least a miracle to me. So now, as for my overall thoughts on Sakura Wars 5 Episode 0, the weird spin-off game that's also a prequel, well, all I have to say is that this is a game that is very average, very much a mid-tier game, but yet I do have a bit of a guilty pleasure with this game. But just because I say it's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me does not mean I'm saying it's good and that I love it, because no, this game definitely does have its problems. And I pretty much already went over them, that yes, I do find that it's really the walking doesn't feel right, I feel like it's just a little bit too stiff for my liking, and the jumping in this game is also pretty janky too, and the camera work is just a bit of a hot mess. But every other aspect that I've talked about has just been fine, and also this game is very far from being unplayable. But I can definitely say for sure that it's not an easy game to recommend, for that even if you are a huge fan of the Sakura Wars series, there's a chance that you probably don't even like the style of gameplay because it's just so vastly different than the main games. But even if you're like me and you also do like a lot of 3D beat-em-up hack and slashes very similar to the Dynasty Warrior games, it just has a bit too much problems for it to being really enjoyable. It does have parts where I do think it can be somewhat fun and entertaining, but it is, as I said, very much a mid-tier game. And just like a lot of other games in the same style, yes, it does get very repetitive, and it's not a game I would recommend playing for hours and hours on end. And I do remember reading somewhere that apparently this game is considered as a terrible game, and I have to say is that I honestly didn't think this game was that terrible at all. It's just a middle-of-the-road game that's not going to appeal to a lot of people. Because when I think of a terrible game, I think of this other game that I have on my mind that, you know what, just for shits and giggles as an added bonus, let's take a look at it real quick. So on the PS2, there was another game released in 2004 in the same style, and that happens to be Shogun's Blade. It was released in Japan and Europe, and it was developed by Tamsoft, a part of the Simple series. Yeah, it's one of those games. And this game right here is straight up a ripoff of Dynasty Warriors 2. But it came out 4 years later, and instead of improving things, it actually is more of a downgrade. So not only does it only have 2 playable characters that are just generic as hell, they have no personality whatsoever. In fact, the game itself has no personality outside of it being a ripoff. And the gameplay is just, well, terrible. The walking is slow as shit. The delay on the attacking is even worse than the delays on Duke Nukem Forever. Even the hit detection on attacking is bad. And this game also uses one single button for attacking, and that's literally it. And the enemies take way too many hits, and as for you, yeah, you can actually die pretty quickly. And it's crazy to think that when this game came out in Europe, it came out in 2005. Like, if you think it's bad enough for a game in 2004 for a game to be like this, imagine playing it in 2005 for Christmas. Man, that talk about a shitty fucking Christmas. So yeah, this is a game that I know for a fact that most people probably couldn't stomach for 5 minutes. And that's all I gotta say about Shogun's Blade on PS2, is that is the definition of a terrible 3D beat-em-up on PS2. And it's all that this game deserves, because I really don't want to make a whole video dedicated towards this game. It's bad enough that I've done a whole video on Eternal Quest from Tamsoft. I mean, do you really want me to do a Dynasty Warrior version of Eternal Quest? Yeah, probably not. So anyways, fuck that game. But yes, now after seeing that, compared to this, yeah, Sakura Wars 5 Episode 0 does not look so bad in comparison, now doesn't it? Of course, it's still not a good game, but compared to that, it's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. But yes, even with all the problems that this game has though, it at least does have some funny charms that do make it amusing, and it's not a completely forgettable game either. I mean, it's kinda hard to forget about a game where you get to play as a American cowgirl riding on a horse while cutting up a bunch of bad guys while you eat hamburgers for health. But the main things that I got out of this game was that not only do I have another game in my list of guilty pleasures for me personally, but also, weirdly enough, this game actually kind of got me more motivated of actually trying to play the mainline games, because I've always wanted to, but now that I have this one under my belt, now I kind of got the fire of actually doing it. Which is weird to say, because I'm sure there's a lot of elitist fans out there that would say that a game like this would turn people away from the series, but no, it actually kind of got me more invested into it. Even though I've always wanted to play this series ever since I watched my friend play So Long My Love all those years ago, but the thing is, there's just way too many fucking video games, and sometimes, like, you always lose track of certain series out there, and this is one that I've always really wanted to, so yeah, I don't know if I'll ever review any of the other games in this series, as I feel like there's already more than enough retrospectives out there, but it'll definitely be something I'll play on my own, or maybe I'll do a stream or something, but yeah, with that being said, this is a stupid game that most of you all watching this probably might not like, but as for me, I like it ironically, but even then, I would say like is very generous, so yeah, I would say I can tolerate it. So that being said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.